if we see the cavity, nasal cavity, so in the nasal cavity you can see these shelf-like projections, three shelf-like projections. They are the superior nasal concha and middle nasal concha and inferior nasal concha. Superior and middle, they are the parts of the labyrinth of the ethmoid bone, while the inferior nasal concha, it is a separate bone. It is not related to the ethmoid bone. Now, what are the spaces which are enclosed by these shelf-like projection? Just above the superior concha, there is a space which is known as sphenoethmoidal recess. Sphenoethmoidal recess, into which the sphenoid paranasal air sinus they drain, they open here. Just below the superior nasal concha, there is a space which is known as superior meatus, in the posterior part of which opens the posterior ethmoidal air cells. This is the middle nasal concha, and just below the middle nasal concha, there is middle meatus, into which we see a semilunar hiatus. Semilunar hiatus, which is known as a hiatus semilunaris. In the middle of this hiatus semilunaris, there is the opening of maxillary air sinus, and in the anterior part of this hiatus, we can see the opening of this is the frontal sinus. Now, if we go frontal air sinus, now just if we go above this opening of the maxillary air sinus, just here, there is the opening of the middle ethmoidal air cells. Middle ethmoidal air cells, they open on the bulla ethmoidalis. Bulla ethmoidalis is the elevation which is caused in the middle meatus by the middle ethmoidal air cells. And just anterior to maxillary air sinus opening, there is the opening of the anterior ethmoidal air cells. And this is the inferior nasal concha, and this is the inferior meatus, that is the cavity below the inferior nasal concha. In the anterior part, we see the opening of the nasolacrimal duct, very small opening. There is a opening of nasolacrimal duct. What is nasolacrimal duct? It is draining all the tears or the secretions of the lacrimal gland into the nasal cavity, into the inferior meatus of the nasal cavity. I repeat, what are the openings which are present in the lateral wall, starting from the sphenoethmoidal recess. So, sphenoidal air sinus, I have told you, it is opening here. What is the opening in the superior meatus? That is the opening of the posterior ethmoidal air cells. What are the openings in the middle meatus? In the middle of hiatus semilunaris, there is the opening of maxillary air sinus. Just above the maxillary air sinus, there is the opening of middle ethmoidal air cells. Anterior to the opening of maxillary air sinus, there are two opening scenes. One of the frontal air sinus, and one is the opening of the anterior ethmoidal air cells. And what about the inferior meatus? In the inferior meatus, we see the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. Now, if we concentrate on this part, this area, you can see the flat and slightly depressed area in front of the middle meatus. This is known as the atrium of the nasal cavity. And here, this area, actually it is filled by the nasal cartilage, and this area is the vestibule of the nose. Vestibule of the nose, it is lined by the skin. It is having the skin and fibrofatty tissue, and it is lined by the skin having the coarse hair, sweat glands and sebaceous glands. Now, in lower down, you can see the palate. Now, this is the hard palate. It is forming the roof of the oral cavity. Below is the oral cavity and above is the nasal cavity, and that's why it is forming the floor of the nasal cavity. Now, hard palate, it is formed by two bones. Anteriorly, it is formed by the palatine processes of the maxilla bone, and posteriorly, they are formed by the horizontal plates of the palatine bone. And we can easily see also, if you concentrate, we can see a suture which is present in between the two bones. This is the level of suture. This is the level of suture. Anteriorly, this is the horizontal plate of this is the palatine process of maxilla, and this is the horizontal plate of the palatine bone. Both they are fusing here through the suture, and they are forming the anterior 2/3 of the palate, which is known as the hard palate. So this is something about the nasal cavity. So in this specimen you can see the opening of you can say the maxillary air sinus, such a large sinus which is present opening into the middle meatus. So this is the opening of the maxillary air sinus. If you go anteriorly, this is the frontal air sinus. These are the paranasal sinuses. Posteriorly, this is the sphenoidal air sinus, and these small sinuses which are present in the ethmoid bone, they are known as ethmoidal air sinuses. So in the body there are 4 sinuses: frontal, ethmoidal, sphenoidal, and maxillary. So this is about the lateral wall as well as the bones forming the lateral wall of the nose. Thank you.